the anime with the age-old notion that heroes are the guardians of goodness, yet they often face betrayal or demise, either at the hands of their allies or their enemies. Despite their sacrifices to safeguard humanity, some folks fear their unrivaled might, choosing to slander or overlook them. This is the story of such a hero who sacrificed his life for peace, only to pray for tranquility in his next life as he breathed his last. In the next scene, a boy named Brett approaches our main character, Alan, and urges him to go to their father, who is waiting. As they part ways, Brett cruelly mocks Alan, remarking that their father is too kind to raise someone as worthless as him, contrasting his feelings towards having Alan as an elder brother. Although he feels ashamed, Brett believes it is time for a change. In the following scene, the father addresses Alan, reminding him that he was born into their family 15 years ago and has remained at level 1 since then. He expresses disappointment that Alan received no gift from God during the recent blessing ceremony, highlighting that everyone else receives one. Concluding that Alan has only brought disgrace to the family, the father decides to cast him out. Alan is ousted from his family, but he doesn't dwell on the loss. Instead, he embraces his newfound freedom with a sense of relief. Liberated from the burdens of his troublesome family, Alan sets out in search of the peace he craves. Reflecting on his restless past as a hero, he yearns for a calmer existence. Guided by a graceful butterfly, Alan embarks on a journey that leads him to the outskirts of his family's estate. Opting to explore the borderlands, he ventures into unknown territory, eager for a fresh start. Along the way, he pauses by a tranquil river, hoping to sustain himself with a humble catch of fish and longing for a simpler life. Perched atop a modest hill, Alan glimpses a peculiar sight in the distance. It's a young knight named Beatrice locked in a relentless battle with a resilient monster. Despite her valiant efforts, the creature repeatedly rises from defeat. Beatrice recounts how she and Princess Rhys were ambushed by these creatures while traveling. Driven by her knightly duty, Beatrice fights to protect others from the looming threat. Beatrice takes a courageous stand to shield Princess Rhys, urging her to flee for safety. Despite having the chance to escape herself, Beatrice refuses to leave anyone behind in peril. However, she reminds Rhys of the vast difference between their status, emphasizing her duty as a mere knight compared to the princess. Meanwhile, from a distance, Alan observes the intense battle unfolding. Upon closer examination, he realizes that the demonic beasts are targeting none other than the kingdom's first princess, Princess Rhys. Alan, empathizing with Rhys's struggles, draws parallels to his own mistreatment in this life. Rhys, who has faced constant criticism, has always shown kindness to Alan, regarding him as an exceptional individual. In appreciation for her kindness, Alan decides to tap into his latent powers, inherited from his previous life as a hero. However, before he can intervene, one of the demonic beasts lands a devastating blow on Beatrice, incapacitating her instantly. Alan harnesses his lightning speed agility and appears before Rhys, who resigns herself to her fate. With a single powerful strike, Alan vanquishes all the demonic beasts, targeting their vulnerabilities with precision, rescuing Rhys from certain peril. Not content with merely saving Rhys, Alan employs his divine healing light magic to swiftly mend Beatrice's severe wounds, erasing her injuries in an instant. When questioned about his extraordinary ability, Alan attributes them to a recent divine blessing, concealing the truth of his inherited powers from his past life. Accepting Alan's explanation, Rhys and Beatrice proceed to elaborate on their mission in the borderlands. Acting on a divine revelation, Rhys is journeying to Clum Village, and Alan, unencumbered by familial ties, chooses to accompany them and offer his assistance. During their journey, Alan shares his painful experiences of mistreatment by his father, Craig, earning sympathy from Rhys. Upon reaching Clum Village, they notice an unsettling silence enveloping the settlement. Beatrice's keen observation reveals that while the village appears inhabited, not a single door stands open, suggesting an abandoned state. Speculating on the cause, Beatrice suggests that marauding monsters from the borderlands may have ravaged the village. However, Alan's heightened senses, augmented by his presence detection magic, detect no signs of such threats. Their investigation leads them to a gathering of villagers, where an elderly man forcibly expels a young girl named Akira. Despite her diminutive stature, Rhys recognizes Akira as the light prophesied in her divine revelation. Akira initially fails to recognize Lies, prompting Lies to recount their past encounters in the royal capital, where they shared meals together and formed a close bond. Apologizing for her forgetfulness, Akira promises not to overlook Lies again, reconciling with her. Curious about Lies' earlier assertion regarding Akira's significance, Alan inquires about it. Lies explains the concept of a special blessing called Braver, which endows its recipient with the strength of 1,000 warriors, essentially making them a hero. As Akira possesses this unique gift, she is deemed the hero of their generation. Lies, inspired by a divine revelation urging her to guide the light away from darkness, interprets this message as her duty to stand alongside the world's hero, explaining her presence in the borderlands. Gathering at a nearby bar for lunch, Akira elaborates on her mission to slay a dragon. She recounts encountering a frightened young girl on the nearby road who pleaded for her assistance, claiming the villagers intended to sacrifice her to the dragon. Determined to investigate the situation, Akira embarked on her quest. Furthermore, when Akira is expelled from the village chief's house and encounters Alan's group, it becomes clear to Alan that the villagers intend to offer the young girl as a sacrifice to the dragon to gain its protection. He recognizes the desperation of the villagers resorting to such a cruel act to fend off monsters. Despite this, Alan intervenes to prevent Akira from slaying the dragon, understanding that such an action would only exacerbate the villagers' plight. Nevertheless, Akira opts to aid the young girl instead of appeasing the heartless villagers, and both Lies and Beatrice join her cause. Deciding to accompany them, Alan acknowledges that he has nothing better to do with his mundane existence. He expresses his belief that he cannot idly stand by while his dear friends are in danger. As the group approaches the mountain where the dragon supposedly dwells, Akira halts them to devise a strategic plan before engaging in battle. First, Akira settles onto the ground, encouraging the group to brainstorm ideas for defeating the dragon. Each person contributes their own plan, with one suggesting they approach the mountain peak via the main road while the others flank from behind. Alan volunteers to join Akira on the front lines, offering his strength to assist her. However, Akira declines his offer, suspecting that Alan would overshadow her efforts and monopolize the victory. Alan is surprised by Akira's keen insight into his character, considering their brief acquaintance. Akira explains that she can discern an unusual aura emanating from Alan, revealing his concealed power. Excited by this revelation, Akira proposes a sparring match with Alan after they deal with the dragon. With the plan in place, Akira departs first with a confident smile, exuding determination to confront the dragon alone. Meanwhile, Alan, Lies, and Beatrice chart their own course to the mountain peak, scaling large boulders to avoid detection by the dragon. As Akira faces off against the towering red dragon, Alan deduces that the villagers were coerced by his father, Duke Craig of Westfeld, into offering their children as sacrifices. Alan suspects that the Duke is leveraging the dragon's power through these sacrifices, explaining why the kingdom's royal knights haven't subdued the beast. Akira initiates the battle by unleashing a powerful lightning strike spell on the dragon, but to her dismay, it fails to inflict any harm. She realizes that defeating the dragon will be no easy feat. Furthermore, she spots the little girl she rescued earlier lying nearby, understanding that the dragon lured her in as bait. Disappointed by Akira's feeble attempt, the dragon scoffs at the notion that such a weak hero could be revered in this world. Akira faces the grim reality of her impending demise, recognizing the vast power gap between her and the formidable dragon. However, Alan refuses to stand idly by and watch her fall victim to the poorly rendered creature. With a single swift strike of his sword, he effortlessly brings down the dragon, showcasing the ease with which he wields his ultimate skill. As the battle concludes and the dragon's immortal life is extinguished by Alan's decisive blow, his sword shatters, symbolizing the shattered dream of a peaceful existence. Yet, he finds solace in the companionship of his newfound friends, realizing that their support transcends mere admiration for his strength. Upon waking up beside Reese, Alan apologizes for oversleeping, attributing it to the exhaustion from their encounter with the dragon. Curious about the well-being of the other girls, Alan learns that they are engaged in vigorous training, brimming with energy and determination. Moved by Reese's selfless acts of healing, Alan recalls the tales of a traveling healer renowned for her saintly deeds, realizing that the rumors surrounding her closely resemble Reese's own actions. Despite feeling remorse for not sharing this aspect of her life earlier, Reese is comforted by Alan's understanding and support, reaffirming their bond regardless of her title or reputation. Touched by Alan's heartfelt words, Reese's spirits are lifted, and she expresses her profound gratitude. Encouraged by the camaraderie and warmth among them, one of the girls invites Alan to spar with her, prompting him to join them eagerly. The scene transitions to Alan bidding farewell to Akira, who requests to accompany them to the nearest village. Akira expresses her aversion to carriages, preferring to walk, while the little girl embraces her tightly, seeking reassurance from Reese if she's certain about taking care of her. Explaining her attachment to the girl and her desire to accompany her on the journey, Akira reveals the girl's lack of family and reluctance to return to the village. Apologizing for her sword, Akira receives assurance from Alan that its breakage wasn't her fault. He acknowledges her vital role in defeating the dragon and emphasizes that her unique sword belongs with her. Alan declares Akira as the true hero for the little girl and credits her indispensable contribution to their victory. Accepting Alan's words, Akira departs with the little girl, bidding farewell to Alan and his companion. Meanwhile, at the palace, Craig discusses the defeat of the Red Dragon King, revealing their plan to lure and eliminate the heroine. Angered by the Saint's interference, Craig's assistant informs him of the Saint's assistance to the girl, further frustrating Craig. Brett suggests deploying a massive herd of creatures for the next encounter, but Craig cautions against risking more magical creatures. Craig's father intervenes, assuring that they're safe in the border areas and will have ample opportunities to eliminate their targets. He instructs the assistant to locate the elves, vowing revenge on the kingdom once they're found. Back with Alan and the girls, he inquires about finding a blacksmith to craft him a new sword. Reese suggests a nearby blacksmith named Elvira in Granholm, while Beatrice mentions another skilled but eccentric blacksmith named Ilf. Despite apologizing for involving him, Alan expresses gratitude, suggesting that he should be thankful in this instance. Regarding returning to the capital as a princess, Reese declines, citing Beatrice's presence and their successful contact with her father. Later, in a secluded part of the forest, Alan uses his magic to start a fire, much to the delight of the girls. They gather around the fire, and Reese inadvertently falls asleep on Alan's leg, quickly apologizing upon awakening. Beatrice chuckles and suggests that since they're engaged, there's no harm in her sharing a sleeping space with Alan. Reese becomes irritated and informs Beatrice that Alan is her ex-fiancé. Alan intervenes, stating that there's no issue with Beatrice sleeping beside him, which surprises Reese, who then expresses her objection, catching Alan off guard. As time passes, both girls drift off to sleep. Alan reflects quietly, finding solace in the moment, noting that such serene companionship is a novelty in his second chance at life in this world. Recollecting their first encounter under the moonlight, Alan muses on the past, while an apparition of his former self appears beside him, admiring the beauty of the moon. Introducing herself as Risa Distilla, Reese expresses her eagerness to become acquainted with Alan, revealing her belief in their engagement. Alan, taken aback by this revelation, is brought back to reality, pondering that perhaps this tranquil interlude resembles the peace he once yearned for. The scene shifts to morning in Granholm town, bustling with activity in the market square. Alan observes the liveliness of the town, which surprises him given its border location. Beatrice explains that adventurers and wanderers often converge there due to its strategic position. Arriving at the blacksmith's abode, Reese expresses confidence in the blacksmith's ability to forge a perfect sword for Alan. Beatrice finds it peculiar that amidst the typically audible clanging of swords, this particular blacksmith remains secluded, solely focused on her craft. Approaching the door, Alan discovers it open and leads the group inside, where they find an array of formidable weapons. Impressed, Alan remarks on the superior quality of these weapons compared to his own broken sword. Suddenly, they hear Reese scream, and they rush to her side to find Noel collapsed on the ground. Beatrice holds her, explaining that this is a common occurrence. Noel often exhausts herself from overwork and falls asleep. They watch as Reese employs her healing magic to rouse her, prompting Alan to inquire if she uses magic every time to alleviate her fatigue. Reese confirms, admitting that she had forgotten about it due to the long interval since she last used her magic. Beatrice adds that when Noel undertakes the creation of a new sword, she becomes so absorbed in her work that she neglects eating and drinking until the task is complete. Once Noel awakens and notices Reese and Beatrice, whom she hasn't seen in a while, she inquires about the boy, Alan. Beatrice elucidates that he serves as a personal guard for Reese Sama and is known as Alan. Noel then asks if they wish for her to craft a new sword for him. She explains her current workload and the numerous orders she has received, indicating her inability to accommodate new requests. Furthermore, Alan already possesses a sword, albeit a broken one. Alan presents the broken sword to Noel for inspection, who discerns that it has been utilized to its fullest capacity, marveling at how someone could achieve such mastery. She reverses her decision and resolves to forge him a new sword. When Beatrice seeks clarification on whether she intends to craft a sword tailored for a hero, one that only a true hero can wield, Noel affirms, asserting that she will fashion a blade surpassing any in her collection, albeit requiring tremendous effort. Unable to decline, Alan agrees, prompting Noel to declare her immediate commencement of the task before ushering them out of her abode and shutting the door. Reflecting on Vanessa, a woman who once served as a blacksmith, Noel resolves to spare no expense in fashioning a sword that surpasses even the most supernaturally potent blade. Next, we find Alan traversing the forest with the girls. Reese voices her concern about Noel undertaking anything reckless. Alan suggests finding an inn to lodge in until the sword is completed. Suddenly, Melina appears and insists that this should be reported. Subsequently, she converses with Horace, expressing satisfaction with Rhys's presence but raising questions about Alan's role as Rhys's personal guard. Inquiring about Alan, Horace determines they need to investigate further. Beatrice advises him to rest, then proposes to Rhys that Alan visit the Adventurers Guild during their downtime. There, he could potentially sell the materials procured from the dragon for a substantial sum. Alan agrees, mentioning his financial strain since his expulsion from his family. He bids farewell to the girls and departs. Beatrice then confers with Rhys, expressing doubts about their plan's feasibility with only the two of them. While acknowledging this, Rhys insists on minimizing Alan's involvement. The scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild, where Alan is welcomed by the receptionist. He expresses his intent to exchange materials for money. The receptionist examines his items, notably surprised by the dragon scale's presence, deeming it exceedingly valuable alongside the other assorted items. She takes the items to inform the manager. Meanwhile, Alan finds himself conversing with Maylene and her assistant, who express curiosity about the dragon. Horace introduces himself and Maylene, noting her status as an Amazon, a rarity in the kingdom. Despite their imposing appearance, they lack insight into adventuring and seek knowledge from experienced adventurers. Horace queries Alan about his acquisition of the dragon scale, wondering if he faced the dragon alone or with allies. Alan admits to needing assistance, prompting Horace to inquire if the heroine accompanied him, presuming the battle was exhilarating. As the receptionist concludes her evaluation, Horace and Maylene depart, discussing their impressions of Alan. Horace remarks on the necessity of assessing Alan's capability, though he didn't anticipate him being bereft of divine gifts, rendering him inconsequential as an opponent. Noel's expression shifts to one of astonishment upon seeing Horace, but she quickly returns her focus elsewhere. Meanwhile, Horace instructs Maylene to shadow Alan discreetly, emphasizing the importance of secrecy to avoid potential complication. With a nod, Maylene vanishes from sight. The scene returns to Alan, who vigorously tests the sword's capabilities by dispatching numerous monsters. Expressing his satisfaction, Alan praises the sword's quality to Noel. Taking the sword in hand, Noel channels her magical prowess, augmenting its strength and sharpness beyond the ordinary eye's perception. She discerns the sword's condition intricately, and enhances its speed and precision through her magic. Impressed by Alan's skill in wielding the sword without a scratch, she suggests challenging stronger adversary. Leading Alan deeper into the forest as night descends, they find their campfire still burning brightly. Noel remarks on the unusual absence of monsters, speculating that they might have fled in fear of confronting Alan. However, Noel's anxiety surfaces as she recalls her mentor Vanessa's advice to flee upon encountering formidable adversary. Encouraging Alan, she urges him to awaken a slumbering monster and engage it with his sword, her voice resounding in the forest. Now we go back to Noel's past, where she attempts to get Vanessa's attention while the blacksmith is engrossed in her work. Noel expresses her hunger, which visibly annoys Vanessa, who hopes her frown will deter the elf. However, hours pass, and Vanessa continues working diligently, while Noel manages to find something to eat. Noel approaches Vanessa, curious about how she uses various tools, but Vanessa remains silent. Feeling ignored, Noel misbehaves by attempting to lift a heavy sword, causing her to lose balance and knock over items on a nearby shelf. Despite the commotion, Noel still fails to capture Vanessa's attention and decides to retreat, returning to sit near the door. Expressing her frustration, Noel questions the appeal of hammering on a sword all day, especially when it leads to feeling sick from lack of food and water. Realizing she won't get a response from a distance, Noel repeatedly approaches Vanessa, calling her names for not responding, but even this approach proves ineffective. The following day, Noel finds herself sleeping anywhere in the house while Vanessa continues hammering away at her work. Suddenly, Vanessa pauses her work and proudly showcases the sword she has forged, lifting it with a smile while Noel observes with curiosity. Returning to the present moment, Noel insists that Alan should slay the beast, but he argues he lacks a reason to do so since the wolf is peacefully sleeping in its corner, away from humans. Alan refuses to take on Noel's quest for vengeance, prompting her to take the boy's sword to seek justice herself. However, Alan cautions her against it, explaining that the creature, Fenrir, possesses a barrier that nullifies any attack below a certain level. He points out that her current sword wouldn't even scratch the monster, reminding Noel that she knows this as she has yet to create a weapon stronger than the sacred sword. With that, Alan leaves the decision in Noel's hands. Upon returning to the lodging, Alan informs the rest of the group about the giant beast in the border region. He suspects someone brought Fenrir to this territory, as the animal was concealed by some kind of magic. Alan has a hunch about the reason behind this development. Before proceeding, Alan inquires whether Lies and Beatrice have disclosed their true mission, making the girls realize they can't keep anything from him. Stalleyes explains that approximately 3 months ago, General Sear, a renowned figure in the kingdom, was murdered, with the perpetrator taking the general's head. Despite numerous attempts using spells to uncover the motive, it remains a mystery to this day. There are suspicions that the culprit may be a demon, given their use of magic unfamiliar to humans. However, demons are not known for targeting humans or being involved in political matters directly, suggesting they might be acting under someone else's command. Due to these circumstances, Lies and Beatrice were investigating this case in the city. After contemplating the situation, Alan believes he has a suspect in mind. Meanwhile, at the border, Mylene ponders who could have undone the camouflage on Femur, realizing it's not a simple task. This leads her to conclude that she might be facing a more formidable adversary than Horace realizes. When she returns to report to her boss, Horace informs her that he will soon take action since his time in the city is limited, instructing Mylene to bring the heads of the elves and the saints. Seeing Mylene's apparent fear, Horace questions how someone as feared as her can be so sensitive. When a magical subordination collar appears on Mylene, Horace makes it clear that he won't accept a refusal. Meanwhile, Noel is busy crafting new weapons and recalls Alan mentioning that depending on how his sword is refined, it might one day be able to harm a Fenrir. Noel asks Alan to share all he knows about it, with Alan agreeing and advising her not to act recklessly with the information he's about to provide. Determined to surpass the sacred sword someday, Noel's exhaustion causes her to drift into sleep once again. In her dream, she relives the horrifying moment when the Fenrir attacked her home, trapping her under falling debris. As Vanessa tries to fend off the Fenrir, Horace acknowledges her skill as a blacksmith, but expresses concern over anyone being able to craft weapons superior to the sacred sword. Vanessa boldly confronts the wolf, but its magical shield shatters her sword, leaving her vulnerable. As the Fenrir turns its attention to Noel, Akira intervenes, launching a lightning bolt at the creature. However, the magic proves ineffective, prompting Akira to engage in direct combat, managing to wound the Fenrir and drive it away. With the enemy gone, Noel mourns Vanessa's sacrifice while Akira urges her to tend to her wounds. Noel questions why Akira's sword could harm the wolf while Vanessa's couldn't. Overwhelmed with grief, Noel clings to the sword her master painstakingly crafted, grieving her loss. At dawn, Noel awakens feeling oddly light and hears a noise outside, initially mistaking it for Lee's presence. However, it's Alan checking on Vanessa, ensuring she didn't overexert herself with work as promised. Later, after completing another sword, Vanessa ventures into the forest where the Fenrir was last seen, apologizing to Alan for using his sword. Upon encountering her arch-rival, Noel prepares to strike the beast with the new blade, but before she can, she is struck by an unexpected attack from the Fenrir. After Noel struggles to her feet, Horace appears and is impressed that she wasn't incapacitated by ephemeris swipe. Finally, he reveals that he was seeking the elf Noel Leonhardt. Noel asks if Horace intends to kill her like he did with Vanessa. Upon hearing Vanessa's name, Horace scratches his chin, recalling that this elf was associated with the dwarf blacksmith. Believing the deaths of the master and apprentice by ephemera to be a twist of fate, Horace suggests that such extraordinary talent as Noel's would be wasted in Fenrir's stomach. He mentions the Grom vision, an innate gift known as the Eyes of the Sovereign Fairy, of which there are only 5 known in the world. Despite Noel's efforts to prevent her fate, when she charges at the wolf, he leaps over her and strikes her back with his hind paw. Before the elf is devoured, Horace asks one last thing, if she would serve him. He promises to reward her, similar to how he does with his subordinate Amazon, who he took away to serve him after destroying her homeland. Confronted with this situation, Noel firmly declares that she would rather die than serve Horace. Displeased with her decision, Horace orders the giant wolf to attack her, but before the final blow, Alan arrives and saves Noel's life. Witnessing Alan's capability, Horace admits underestimating him but criticizes Alan for leaving his main post, as it could endanger Princess Lies. Meanwhile, Mylene is already inside Lies and Beatrice's room. But as she approaches Lies' bed, she finds only a tied mattress. Lies and Beatrice were prepared for Mylene's arrival and are waiting hidden. Alan mocks the enemy's arrogance for not considering Mylene's discovery, as he had placed a barrier around Lies to nullify invisibility. Horace finds Alan's mention of his supposed past life amusing, but knows that even with Mylene exposed, it doesn't guarantee Beatrice's victory over her. In the inn room, the two warriors fight fiercely over the princess's life. Just as Beatrice is about to unleash her full strength against her opponent, Lies intervenes and implores her to stop immediately. This distraction allows the Amazon to seize the opportunity and strike her opponent with her elbow, knocking her unconscious. With her adversary incapacitated, Marlene sees an opportunity to eliminate the princess, but hesitates, giving Beatrice enough time to rescue her friend. Observing the battle from a distance, Alan realizes that the two warriors don't need assistance and informs Horace that his attempt to execute the princess has failed. Despite this setback, Horace remains confident, knowing that Fenrir cannot be harmed without his sacred sword. He commands the wolf to attack the defiant boy, but Alan effortlessly creates an opening in the monster's body, causing Horace to retreat in fear. Alan then carries the unconscious Noel back home, taking advantage of her state after being healed and exhausted from forging all night. Liz rushes to check on her friend's well-being, relieved to find that everyone is safe. However, Noel is displeased upon waking up and discovering that Alan had carried her without her consent. The following day, they confirm that Mylene is no longer under Horace's control, so she should be able to speak freely. Beatrice suggests taking her to an official trial in the capital, but Liz disagrees, believing that Mylene isn't inherently evil and prefers to find a peaceful resolution. Despite objections that Mylene attempted to harm a princess, Liz argues it wasn't her intention. She also speculates that Mylene may have someone waiting for her among her people, but the Amazon reveals her homeland was destroyed, leaving her with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. This triggers Noel's memory of being rescued by Vanessa, and prompts the dwarf blacksmith to offer Mylene shelter in her home. In a gesture of empathy, Noel cuts Mylene's bonds and invites her to stay with her. Beatrice expresses concern that Mylene may pose a threat to Liz, but Noel trusts her instincts and believes Mylene won't harm them. Mylene is deeply moved by this unexpected kindness and begins to cry. Beatrice realizes she may have been too harsh on Mylene, but seeing her cry tears of joy, she understands that everything is okay now. Alan, recognizing that today's problem is resolved, ventures alone into the forest in the middle of the night and casts a powerful spell. Meanwhile, Horace is relieved to be far away from any danger, pondering over the identity of the exceptionally skilled boy. Unbeknownst to him, Alan targets him with a spell, creating a rift that summons a ghastly creature to his location. Just as Alan arrives to inquire about certain matters, the creature claims to have eliminated Horace to prevent any information leakage. The Duke of Westfeld agrees with the creature's actions, attributing the blame to the demons and expressing disdain for their deceptive tactics. His son echoes this sentiment, suggesting that the demons staged the ordeal to avoid harming the saint or the elf, revealing their true nature. In response, the demon intimidates the boy, who asserts his capability to handle the princess and the elf. Despite the demon's insistence on taking care of the archbishop's hero, his son insists on accompanying his father, confident in his abilities unlike his brother. We flash back to a moment from Lisa's childhood when she was being escorted in her carriage along a treacherous path. Suddenly, the carriage shakes violently, causing Lisa's uncle to grasp onto her tightly to protect her from harm. Outside, the soldiers shout warnings of monster attacks, prompting the protective knight to ask Lisa to stay inside while he joins the allies in battle. To Lisa's dismay, the warriors are losing against the winged creatures, and one of them manages to reach her carriage. Thankfully, her uncle intervenes just in time to prevent a disaster. However, the monster retaliates and seriously injures the knight, lifting him into the air. Despite being injured, the knight manages to impale the monster with his sword, and they both fall into a ravine. Returning to the present, the heroes stroll through a peaceful village where they pause their investigation to inquire about an upcoming festival from some men assembling a structure. One of the workers informs them that the Spirits Festival is approaching, an annual event where they honor their ancestors' spirits. As the outsiders appear apprehensive, another local man clarifies that it's a customary practice in their village. He explains that it's simply a festive occasion where they dress up as spirits and engage in lively dancing. Liz then inquires if anyone has seen a person clad in silver armor, but none of the villagers seem familiar with such a figure, leading Beatrice to accept that it might have been just a rumor. Surprisingly, even the local guild doesn't have any information, leaving the group feeling like they're going in circles during their investigation. However, Noel recalls a story from an adventurous client who mentioned a ghost residing in a nearby village, possibly a member of the royal family, driven by resentment for the oppression faced by his lineage. This ghost allegedly wears silver armor stained with blood and wanders among the graves at night. While recounting this tale, Noel tries to spook her companions, causing Beatrice to startle at the sound of a falling sword. Despite her friends teasing her, Beatrice insists she's not afraid of ghosts. They decide to continue their investigation in the village, with Alan considering the notion of spirits akin to summoning the dead, which only adds to Beatrice's unease. As they resume their search, focusing on the cemetery mentioned by Noel, Beatrice struggles to contain her nerves in the eerie atmosphere. Suddenly, they encounter the same man they saw the previous day, but this time he appears peculiar. Nevertheless, he guides them to the village leader's residence, claiming that the leader will have more information about the village's affairs. Alan questions the man's presence in the cemetery, to which he responds that he was simply wandering and happened upon the group by chance before taking his leave. Shortly afterward, inside the house, the village leader assures them that it's typically a peaceful place and he himself has never heard any rumors about spirits or the like. He then kindly offers his home for everyone to spend the night, mentioning that the festival will commence the next day and they are welcome to join. Alan promptly accepts the offer, and the man heads off to prepare the sleeping arrangements. Once settled in bed, Lisa drifts off into a dream where she finds herself in a beautiful palace garden with her uncle, adorned in his customary armor and cloak. In her dream, she mistakenly addresses him as Dad, but he gently corrects her, though she secretly enjoys the thought of having two fathers. The knight sadly informs her that he'll be embarking on a long expedition and won't be able to give her a kiss goodbye, but he promises to return as soon as he can. Lisa harbors doubts about his promise, but her uncle teaches her the importance of believing in people, emphasizing that trust forms bonds and defines our humanity. Awakening from her dream, Lisa hears a noise outside and peers through the window to spot her uncle walking away from the house. Without hesitation, she rushes after him into the cemetery, where she finds herself surrounded by undead rising from their graves. However, it all turns out to be another vivid dream, and Alan, hearing her screams, rushes to her side to check on her. Within moments, Lisa catches her breath and embraces her friend tightly, grateful for his comforting presence. The following day, as the sun begins to set, the Spirits Festival commences, and Beatrice can't help but find the celebration somewhat peculiar, considering that treating the deceased in such a manner is a major taboo in her homeland. Alan proposes that the royal knight should utilize her authority to put an end to the festivity, but the apprehensive warrior counters, stating that no harm has been inflicted thus far. As time elapses, everything appears ordinary, yet Alan remains unsettled by a lingering sense of unease in the village. Suddenly, the enigmatic Mackinac man reappears, encouraging the visitors to immerse themselves in the festivities, and even suggesting that Alan and Beatrice join the dance. Using his unique vision to assess the situation, Alan agrees to the suggestion and departs with the bodyguard close behind. Left alone, Lisa notices an eerie purple haze hanging in the air and hears someone calling her name. Recognizing the voice, she spots her uncle amidst the jubilant crowd of villagers. Determined to reach him, Lisa ventures into the depths of the dark forest. Upon finally encountering her uncle, she is reprimanded for venturing into such perilous territory alone. Lisa contends that she's with her dad and had been searching for him all along. Following his fall, an extensive search was conducted, but his body was never recovered, leading Lisa to believe he was still alive. Curious about his whereabouts during this time, Lisa's uncle reveals that he harbored resentment toward the royal family and went into hiding to seek revenge. He explains that Lisa's father, the king, sought individuals with extraordinary abilities, such as the power to slay dragons, forge unparalleled weapons, enhance soldiers' strength, and bring glory to the nation, along with Lisa's saintly power. These abilities, referred to as gifts from the gods, possess the potential to either safeguard or jeopardize the kingdom, rendering their bearers as pawns in the king's quest for supremacy. Lisa remarks on the absurdity of the situation, and her uncle concurs, cautioning that the king holds a different perspective. In the king's eyes, those endowed with natural gifts are perceived as rebels intent on wreaking havoc in the name of the gods. This belief led the king to decree their demise, and Lisa's uncle is determined to protect her. Despite this reality, Lisa wishes to attempt to resolve the situation through dialogue, as her uncle once emphasized the importance of trusting people. Initially acknowledging his previous sentiment, her uncle ultimately realizes he has no choice but to violently confront Lisa, drawing his sword against her. However, just as he is poised to strike, Alan intervenes just in time. Recognizing Alan as the individual previously engaged to Lisa, her uncle doesn't engage in idle conversation but rather demands Alfred's return immediately, casting a magic spell to break the curse. Upon being freed from the curse, Alfred expresses gratitude to Alan. He then reveals to his niece that he is already deceased, and his attack wasn't of his own volition. Furthermore, he discloses that the king's previous sentiments were not his own but the machinations of demons. Nevertheless, it's true that he harbors animosity toward the royal lineage. As the second in line for succession, he faced numerous challenges, including attempts to sabotage his relationship with his brother. For these and various other reasons, Alfred grew to resent the treacherous environment of royalty and opted to forge a new path in life. Despite achieving success, such as attaining the position of vice captain of the First Order of Knights, he found true peace only in Lisa's presence. Having revealed the entire truth, Alfred acknowledges that his time is running short. He entrusts Alan with the care of his beloved niece, noting her occasional recklessness despite her goodness. Additionally, Alfred expresses his desire to challenge Alan to a duel, recognizing that Alan will soon become the guardian of his most cherished treasure and wanting to ascertain the young man's worthiness. Thus, Alfred initiates the duel not as a mere corpse, but as a man, a knight, and a father. Although Alan does not hold back, the duel appears evenly matched from the outset. Alfred highlights the significance of the day being the Spirits' Festival, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur, making their clash a poignant example of this phenomenon. This duel, akin to a fleeting dream of a single night, offers the only opportunity to dance with those who have departed. Despite the amicable nature of the duel, Lisa becomes visibly anxious, especially as she recalls a past event where she implored Alfred to protect her from menacing monsters. In response, Alfred assured her of his protection, albeit with a jest about his commitment lasting only until someone stronger came along. Returning to the present, Lisa finally bids farewell to her uncle, who takes the opportunity to apologize for leaving her in such a manner. He assures her of his well-being, finding solace in knowing that she was a true daughter to him. The joy he felt when she called him father was difficult for him to conceal, a testament to the depth of their bond. At last, Lisa grasps her stepfather's hand tightly and expresses her love for him as Alfred bids his final farewell. With the conclusion of the festival, Alan quietly surveys the village surroundings. When the local leader queries when Alan became aware of the truth, Alan reveals that he had long known that the town harbored many deceased souls under the leader's control. Yet, Alan chose not to intervene, recognizing that despite the coexistence of the living and the dead, the village remained tranquil. The elder presses whether peace can truly exist under the governance of a demon, but Alan refuses to oversimplify by categorizing all demons as inherently malevolent. Nevertheless, the elder's actions align closely with the stereotype, prompting Alan to hope that the human knight will become a valuable asset in his collection. As the demon pits his undead minions against Alan, the young man severs the threads binding the zombies to the village leader's control. With a swift and decisive strike, Alan dispatches all adversaries before him and retrieves the blue stone dropped by the elder. This forces the demon, who serves the ducal family of Westfeld, to acknowledge another failure, much to Brett's frustration. Brett's father admonishes him, asserting that allowing a young girl to escape won't impede their plans. Brett concurs, having fulfilled his role by procuring the Archbishop's head. The following day, as Lisa appears shaken, Beatrice reassures her of her unwavering support. Examining the blue stone, Alan discerns his brother Brett's influence within it. Interestingly, the only remaining part of Alfred was his head, while the head of the slain general vanished. Connecting the pieces, Alan unravels the truth behind the mystery. Suddenly, Lisa receives word of General Cyril's return, leaving the trio astonished by the news. Brett remembers how his father treated him poorly after their mother passed away, and how others praised his older brother, fueling his resentment towards Alan. He even pushed Alan's hand away when he tried to comfort him. Brett wakes up abruptly, recalling his father calling him a failure when he was young. After preparing himself, he approaches his father, but is met with a chilling laugh from the Duke, who is burning a report. His father reveals their plan for revenge against the kingdom and the gods, believing himself to be the rightful ruler. Meanwhile, Captain Edward and Vice Clark patrol the capital, noticing rumors of Cyril's return spreading. They suspect it's being used to incite unrest. Clark wonders if the general might be an imposter, but Edward reminds him of their duty to protect the kingdom regardless. Despite uncertainties, they remain committed to Cyril's legacy and vow to thwart any threats to the kingdom, even confronting a hooded figure in an alleyway. Clark prepares for action and demands to know who is there. He and Edward are surprised to see the Archbishop. Edward questions why the clergyman is in such a shady place without an escort. The Archbishop cryptically states that he has something to tell only Edward and asks him to follow. Edward's attitude shifts as he agrees to follow the Archbishop. Clark is puzzled and tries to object, but Edward believes gathering information is crucial despite the risks. He assures Clark that he'll return soon and leaves him in charge during his absence. Clark watches helplessly as Edward walks into potential danger. The Archbishop leads Edward to the old training grounds, leaving him puzzled. The clergyman then abruptly departs, leaving Edward alone. Suddenly, a figure emerges behind Edward and attacks. Edward reacts swiftly, drawing his blade to block the attack, and realizes that it's the Duke. He acknowledges the Duke's skill but points out that his aggressive demeanor gave away his identity. Edward recalls their last encounter at his late wife's funeral. Curious about the Duke's intentions, Edward questions him. The Duke, however, insults him and declares that the Archbishop is now under their control before launching another attack. Edward defends himself and demands clarification. Ignoring the question, the Duke reminisces about their past sparring sessions and reflects on his own grief after his wife's death, expressing a desire to leave this world. Meanwhile, Brett journeys to the capital and recalls a childhood moment where he questioned Alan about being a failure. Despite Alan's reassurance, Brett couldn't believe it and ran away in tears. Over time, Brett's progress earns his father's favor, while Alan is seen as the failure for his lack of advancement. Brett feels frustrated by Alan's indifference to being labeled a failure. Bert confidently asserted to his older brother that he was the rightful heir to lead their family, but Alan remained unmoved by his words. Bert became irritated that such thoughts were occupying his mind at the moment. A demon appeared to assure him that their part of the plan was proceeding smoothly. However, they expressed concern about the Westfeld house's ability to overcome Edward, given his power to neutralize any other ability within a 1-meter radius. Bert reassured them that his father would handle Edward without any difficulty, but if necessary, Bert could use his own ability to set their plan in motion. Turning to the demon, Bert began berating them for their frequent mistakes. He was startled when another demon appeared to inform their leader that the hero had arrived. The devil reminded Brett that they were providing support to his family, so errors on their part would not be tolerated. Brett remained confident that he was not a failure like Alan. Meanwhile, Akira arrives at the capital, feeling anxious about getting lost in the bustling crowds. The hero senses her unease and tightly grips her hand to reassure her. Akira becomes aware that they are being followed, so she decides to lead them to a quieter part of the city to confront their pursuers. The demons soon reveal themselves, surrounding Akira and expressing their intent to harm her. Despite their threats, Akira remains undaunted, surprised by their belief that they can defeat her. The demons unveil their plan to exploit her connection to her village, where everyone bears a magic sigil that can be used to trigger a deadly explosion. Facing the imminent danger, the demons speculate whether Akira will sacrifice herself to save the village or abandon the child to save her own life. Despite Akira's attempts to push her away, the hero stands steadfast, declaring that a true hero never flees from danger. In a critical moment, a protective barrier materializes, shielding them from the incoming fireball. Akira recalls Alan mentioning that he replaced the sigil on the girl with his own. Now, she comprehends his words and is astonished that he could detect it elsewhere in the city. Meanwhile, Clark has organized a unit to search for the captain. Their efforts are interrupted by a demon who tries to persuade them that their gifts are being used to control them. However, Clark remains focused on their duty to safeguard the kingdom. He rejects the demon's words and draws his sword in defiance. The demon attacks, injuring some of the knights and delivering a significant blow to the vice captain. Just as the situation seems dire, Beatrice arrives to offer assistance. Meanwhile, the battle between the captain and the duke continues, with the noble gaining the upper hand and delivering a fatal blow. Edward realizes that the duke's high level compensates for his nullified gift. The Duke reveals his belief that true ascension requires attaining the strength to challenge even gods. As the Duke prepares to strike the final blow, the hero intervenes, disguised as a demon, much to his surprise. During that time, Bert arrives at the capital, manipulating the Archbishop and Cyril with his puppet-style gift. They aim to convince the people that the gods have deceived them, portraying gifts as more of a curse than a blessing. Instead of empowering individuals to follow their dreams and shape their own destiny, they argue that the gifts constrain them. They propose a solution where Bert uses his marionette ability to awaken people's latent talents, allowing them to seize control of their lives. However, the crowd is skeptical about the sustainability of this plan without Bert's presence. Bert reveals the demons, instilling fear in the crowd, but assures them that these entities will help fill the void left by the loss of their gifts. In an impassioned speech, Bert urges the crowd to unite and pursue their desires freely. However, internally, he harbors the desire to create a situation where he becomes indispensable to the masses. Cyril introduces a powerful sorceress life form, claiming it to be a valuable asset with the strength of 10,000 men. Bert succeeds in winning over the crowd, who cheer for the promising future he paints, unaware of his true intentions to control the world. However, the situation takes a turn when Alan unexpectedly appears and addresses his younger brother, leaving Bert shocked and pondering the reason for Alan's presence in the capital. Alan carefully observes Beatrice's behavior and takes note of the kingdom's surroundings as she accuses the demons and the Duchy of Westfeld of executing the general and attempting to kidnap Princess Glees. Meanwhile, the demon is confident that all the humans will soon face their demise, so he decides to disclose the truth as a final farewell gesture. As the demon begins to speak, Mylene activates a listening device while remaining invisible, broadcasting the demon's speech through speakers near the palace. The demon admits that individuals with powerful abilities like those of the general and the princess pose a threat to his race, which seeks domination, leading them to try to persuade humans to relinquish their abilities voluntarily. In a moment of desperation, Brett pretends that his brother is orchestrating everything to provoke him, and he loudly accuses Alan of disrupting his plan, causing the population to become even more suspicious of Brett, who had presented himself as the nation's savior. Princess Lies herself appears and confirms that the attempted execution against her was indeed carried out by magical beings like those Brett presented as protectors of the kingdom. With no more room for deception, Brett laughs and asserts that Alan has interfered where he wasn't needed. He then uses his gift of puppetry to control the guards, but Alan intervenes at the crucial moment, severing the strings emanating from the villain and incapacitating the soldiers, the archbishop, and the general all at once. Confronted with this situation, Brett has no option but to call upon the magical creatures he brought into existence, leading to chaos erupting in the capital square, causing people to flee desperately for their lives. Witnessing the catastrophe unfolding around him, Alan feels a sense of responsibility, partly blaming himself for not being able to prevent this tragedy by taking better care of his brother. However, he also recalls vividly that it was Brett himself who rejected Alan's efforts to help him when there was still time. In this moment, Brett attempts to use his magical strings to control his brother, but Alan redirects the strings toward himself and lands a punch on Brett, who was caught off guard by the sudden impulse, leaving him stunned. Meanwhile, Lies provides comfort to a lost little girl amidst the chaos, while Alan resolves to address one more unresolved matter. Lies questions whether it will be too painful for Alan to handle, triggering a painful memory in the boy of his father belittling him, insinuating that he was a failure. Despite this, Alan asserts that he will manage, showing resilience in the face of adversity. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Mylene bravely engage in battle with the demon, utilizing their invisibility to try to level the playing field. The demon recognizes Mylene as the girl Horus created, but Beatrice corrects him, stating that Mylene is now a loyal ally of Adestella. Regardless, the demon realizes that if the other warrior present is as formidable as Beatrice, it would be wise to flee. Consequently, the entity opens a portal to escape, but Mylene swiftly throws a precise knife, disrupting the demon's attempt. Beatrice then drives her sword into the demon's chest, ultimately defeating him. Following the conflict, Clark expresses his desire to ask the princess of the bodyguard many questions and bows to thank her for her assistance. Beatrice is pleased with the reunion but emphasizes that there is no time for nostalgia, as demons are attacking various points in the capital, instilling terror in the helpless population. In response, the first squadron of knights rises once more to fulfill their role as the kingdom's shield and protect its people, until a familiar blacksmith arrives. Equipping weapons to bolster the defense forces, Clark and his soldiers express gratitude for the efforts of the elf Noel, who provided everything she could to arm the resistance soldiers. Meanwhile, Acura marvels at the supernatural movements of the opponent, who seems to anticipate their actions. Edward explains that Craig Westfelt uses his gift, the funeral agent, to see the future and predict the attacks he will face. The man's bloodlust prompts the captain of the first squadron to shout that Mariel would never approve of such tactics. This simple statement strikes a chord with Edward, who recalls countless times using his gift to predict Mariel's death and attempting to save her, yet she still met her demise in the end, leaving him feeling powerless. The Duke believes that his wife was merely a pawn in the hands of the cursed gods, destined to be the mother of a hero with the title Holy Mother. However, instead of conceiving a gifted child, she bore a failure. As his grief intensified, Craig cursed the fate imposed on his wife by the gods, driving him to seek solace in destruction to numb the pain. On the contrary, Akira views Craig's behavior as childish and ridicules his inability to accept loss. Acknowledging his fixation on trivial matters, Craig relinquishes his life force to attain diabolic power. Akira attempts to intervene, but Craig's spell incapacitates her. She retaliates with the blue lightning technique, yet Craig's demonic power overwhelms her, hurling her against the wall. Edward warns Duke Westfelt of the dire consequences of embracing such dark power, but Craig's greed consumes him entirely. He engulfs Edward in darkness, plunging him into the depths of his consciousness, where Edward experiences the sorrow and resentment of his old friend. Moved by Edward's plea for forgiveness, Craig momentarily ceases his spell, only to fatally wound him with his sword, bringing him to his demise. Confronted by his actions, Craig descends into madness, declaring that no one can comprehend his inner turmoil. Acker reveals that the man, in his final moments, cherished thoughts of his friend. However, Craig, consumed by his own desires, disregards this sentiment and targets the heroine for death. Just as Craig is about to strike, Alan arrives in time, wielding a magical sword crafted by Noel to intercept the attack. Craig finds it ironic that his own failed son is attempting to thwart him amidst the chaos of war. Although Alan wishes someone else could take his place, he realizes it falls upon him. Despite his efforts, Craig continues to view Alan as an obstacle, launching another spell. However, Alan defends himself with his sword, striking a blow to Craig's pride. Questioning Alan's unexpected defiance, Craig is reminded by Alan that he himself has revealed his true nature. Despite being labeled a failure, Alan acknowledges his duty to protect those who depend on him in the kingdom, honoring his mother's legacy and her desire for peace. Enraged by Alan's mention of Muriel, Craig unleashes a devastating spell, casting Alan into the depths of his own consciousness. Trapped within the darkness, Alan experiences despair, confronting memories of Craig's love for Muriel, a side of his father he never knew. Instead, Alan was met with disdain or indifference from his father, leaving him feeling vulnerable and alone, especially when Brett rejected his offer of help. In the end, he decided to shut himself off from the world, avoiding getting emotionally involved in life's ups and downs. But amidst the darkness, some people reached out to him, showing him that there's still light to be found. With this newfound belief, Alan breaks free from his father's mental grip. Returning to the surface, he unleashes a powerful technique called Demon Slaying Sword, accompanied by 100 flowers blooming, dealing a heavy blow to Craig Westfeld and worsening the bleeding in his eyes. In response, Craig succumbs further to demonic power, losing more of his own identity. This unleashes a storm that covers the kingdom of Adastella. Despite the chaos, Lee tries to keep hope alive among the people, reassuring them that Alan will come to save the capital. Meanwhile, Akira remarks that no ordinary human can defeat what Craig has become. Alan, however, steps up, determined to confront his father. He attacks with a beam of light, aiming to break through the hurricane. But the force of the impact sends him crashing into his father's energy sphere, where Craig seems trapped, perhaps wishing for escape or a swift end. Seeing his father's suffering, Alan realizes they may be more alike than he thought. Both have been trying to escape pain, whether by shutting themselves off or being consumed by anger. Reflecting on his journey, Alan realizes he may have misunderstood things from the beginning. With gratitude, he thanks his father for the lesson, then drives his sword into the ground, bringing his father back from the depths of hatred and returning him to a more humane form. However, as Craig Westfeld begins to disintegrate, a magical butterfly lands on his hand, signaling his departure from the world. In his final moments, Craig acknowledges that his son, despite being deemed a failure, fulfilled his destiny, and he cries out for his eternal love, Muriel. As Craig's ashes are carried away by the butterfly, Alan is offered the title of Duke of Westfeld as a reward. However, he declines, surprising everyone except for one person. The king, along with an advisor, reveals that he foresaw this outcome, recalling how Alan was cherished by his daughter, Liz. He expresses joy that Alan protected both the kingdom and his daughter, Liz. Subsequently, Mylene questions Alan's next move, but Liz arrives, expressing her desire to join her friends on their journey to Granholm. She reveals that she is now Liz Westfeld, and must also oversee her lands. Mylene is taken aback by the news of Liz inheriting the Westfeld lands. Alan, resigned to the situation, comments on the irreversible nature of events. Beatrice, formerly a personal guard of the royal family, is relieved from service due to Liz's departure from the family. Despite her efforts to continue serving the princess, Liz insists on being independent. She expresses her trust in Alan's company for her safety. Realizing that there are people who still rely on him, even in his perceived failure, Alan joins Liz in the carriage as they embark on a journey to wherever life takes them. This brings an end to our episode 6. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for more amazing Rick Pats.